so.
I support two teams evenly. Philadelphia Eagles
And anyone who's
who
against
beats
Dallas, right?
That's right. Anyone who beats Dallas. So,
You
Drew
Dallas
Brees
guy?
went marching in.
I have no sympathy for any of you. I'm a
Oh, I
Dolphins
was
fan.
singing. Oh, and this is.
Exactly.
Tough day.
What's that?
Tough day.
Tough 30 years. Tough day.
You know, you want to kick a guy when
Since
they're down,
1984, so.
Oh, I saw your
Frank, I was a year old when we last won something.
Oh, that's a dirty guy.
Okay, so we're waiting on Naz.
Andrea, here's a chair right in the front there.
Hey, neighbor. What's up, bud? Good. I didn't see you sitting there. Pretty good.
Good. But I think we have to study it. We're adding technology.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Caffrey.
Present.
Mr. Evans. Present. Mr. Colella. Here. Ms. Kaczak. Present. Mr. Quinn. Here. Dr. Susan. Here. Ms. Thomas. Here. Reverend Walker. Here. Mr. Elmy is absent. We have a quorum.
The chair wishes to announce that the board held an executive session on September 23rd, 2015, and prior to the regular board meeting of October 5th, 2015. Subjects discussed in executive session related solely to matters of employee relations, labor negotiations, and/or threatened or actual litigation. Motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of September 14th, 2015, and dispense with the reading of those minutes.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Katzak, second by Ms. Thomas. All in favor?
Aye.
Treasurer's report of July 31st, 2015.
To the President, members of the Wilkes-Barre Board of Education, the Treasurer submits the following report for acceptance and audit. The cash account balances for the month ending July 31st, 2015. General fund is $15,753,313.12. Special revenue funds shows a balance of $506,582.72. Trust agency funds has a balance of $2,226,161.49. Food service fund shows a balance of $1,895,856.42. And debt service fund shows a balance of $9,282.07. That's the report.
Motion to approve?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Thomas, second by Reverend Walker. Call for vote?
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Colella?
Yes.
Ms. Kaczak?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Dr. Susan?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Caffrey?
Yes.
8 yeses, motion carries.
Unfinished business? Communications from Dr. Prevznek.
Thank you, Mr. Caffrey. For several months, this district has faced many challenges, but perhaps none greater than the current financial crisis that we face and the ramifications that it holds for the future of this district. I assure you, every attempt is being made to address the severity of the depleted general fund. With our state subsidies in limbo and our district's operating costs continually depleting our reserve on a daily basis, it has been decided that we are not above seeking outside help and advice from consultants who are well versed in the field of educational finances and management. It has been the philosophy of this board and this district to practice transparency and honesty in all of our undertakings. And thus I report this evening that we have contacted the Pennsylvania Department of Education in order to obtain assistance and recommendations regarding our district finances. We have, in my estimation, been willing to listen to and take into consideration the recommendations and suggestions of others. This action allows us to obtain expert services without expense to this district, as well as securing an objective report on how to proceed regarding our current financial situation. I want to publicly thank Tony Greco from the IU 18, who helped facilitate this process, and Assistant Education Secretary, Mr. David Volkman, whose office will be assisting in this venture. We welcome the presence of PDE and the service that will be provided to this district. There has been much discussion and concern from our district stakeholders who represent the community and the district itself over our current financial state and the ability to move forward as a school district. I as well share that concern. We are expecting PDE to start the process over the next few weeks and share their results with our district not soon after. And I thank you, Mr. Caffrey.
Thank you, Dr. President. Communications from citizens.
Yes, Mr. President, we've had several people sign in tonight. The first is Mr. Bob Holden, who'd like to speak about school closing. Mr. Holden, I'll remind you, 3 minutes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
How are you doing? Nice to see us all again. I've been asking people for questions, anything that they have to ask that they're not willing to come ask or they're afraid to ask. Some people aren't comfortable, so I'm just gonna get right to them. I'm gonna spit them all out there if there's anything after that. The first one I got, it is, we have Myers, GAR, Coughlin, which you said you cannot afford. So after the merger, you will have the new school, GAR, Mackin, and an extension on Kistler. How is that gonna be any different? Are you closing Coughlin November 1st? How is the budget impasse gonna affect the school district? Are you planning on borrowing in order to bridge the budget? And you kind of just hit on that. Why was approximately $240,000 spent on Coughlin if we had planned on closing it? Who did the work and who determined it that Coughlin needed to be closed? I believe it was $240,000 on the courtyard.
Fall protection, Bob?
I believe so. Why would a project be started without a guarantee of funding or reimbursement? What is the plan for Coughlin juniors and seniors? What amount was the final cost of Mackin? And is the board guaranteed, is the bond guaranteed, I'm sorry. Do we have the borrowing capacity? How many teachers are needed per X amount of students? So if you have 7 students per room, how many teachers do you need per student? What is the amount of buses we'll need if and when it goes through? How many and at what price? Our projected savings coming from teacher attrition. And Myers has the only life skills class in the secondary schools in the district. Will the new school accommodate that? And just, this was mine, I saw this in there. Are we paying tuition for people going to Holy Redeemer? And that's it. Thank you very much.
I tried to write as many questions as
I know, I didn't want to run out of time. I mean,
And that was pretty good.
well, I did. A lot of people had some questions, and I want to make sure I get them out there further.
Well, I can address some of the, you said 240,000, and we have our team. I don't know if Mr. Leonard's here this evening. I don't see him.
No, he's
He's not. Once again, I'll have to check into that, Mark, if it was that high. It's all about the safety of the kids in that building. You're saying 240,000 for fall protection, Bob. It could have been that high. I'm not sure. I don't think it was. But again, Mr. Leonard's not here. Understand the goal of this board and myself when we heard about the condition of Coughlin High School. And it was Mr. Leonard, our expert, and our team of experts who talked to us, and I personally was up on the roof several times examining what they were talking about. My fear was at Coughlin was the idea that, of course, trying to avoid any harm to any child or personnel as well. Who made the decision in regard to Coughlin High School being closed is one of the questions, I think.
Yes.
Are you talking about the main building where now, as of January, where our 11th and 12th graders will be housed in the annex, and the 9th and 10th graders will go up to Mackin, is again to assure their safety. And the decision was, I had brought it to the board about that, and I have just discussed this evening again, and I wanted to, and I could show you, Bob, if you'd like, the options that were looked into prior to the idea of Mackin, one of our own schools, and also the annex, of course, our own school. When Coughlin, when the issues at Coughlin came about, and if this was May of 2014, I personally inspected to try to look at any options we had available, along with some board members and members of the team. The Blue Cross Building, the East End Amato Center, the Alternative Learning Center, the Wilkes-Barre Township Building, Mackin eventually, Holy Savior Church, Plains Township Reserve Center, local colleges and universities. I looked at with PDE the possibility of a split schedule between schools, Sacred Heart Elementary, St. Peter's and Paul's Elementary, and a realignment of the current buildings to assure the safety of the students at Coughlin High School. I think we exhausted every possibility in regard to that situation, Bob. And remember, we only had a limited amount of time to deal with this in regard to school opening. So we were trying to work quickly on this. I think we did a pretty good job in trying to look at every facility that was brought to our attention. I don't know if there's any other, go ahead.
A couple supplements. You had asked about who had done the work at Coughlin for the fall protection. It was bid. It was a public bid. Marpol was the low bidder and was awarded that contract to do that work, and they did perform that work based upon that bid. The Mackin final cost, I don't have that number right in front of me, but I can tell you Mackin is on schedule and under budget with regard to what was budgeted for contingencies during the project. Gary, where are we at percentage of contingency?
It's like 1.6%, a change order.
And we had budgeted 7%?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're it's 1.6 in the contingency, we had budgeted 7%, so we're under budget and on time for Mackin.
Right, okay.
You made a question about the borrowing capacity. There's a couple issues to that. As far as the district's borrowing capacity, we're nowhere near our borrowing capacity as far as the amount of debt we can incur under the Debt Act. We actually have very little current debt right now, and so as far as what we could borrow under the Debt Act, we're not even close to that. And even going through this project, we wouldn't be close to exhausting it. So that that question I think was directed toward the Debt Act. So we are not at the limits of what we can borrow under the Debt Act. You had one question about the number of schools and how many buildings we will have if the projects go forward as anticipated. Our recollection is just generically, ballpark figures with the new construction and the consolidation of the two schools, and even with the addition to the Kistler building, we still have approximately 90,000 square feet less of building space that we'd be occupying, heating, providing electricity to, and you'd have all that new space, which would be much more energy efficient than the old space. And I was trying to scribble down quickly as you were talking. And you had a question about a Holy Redeemer student. My understanding is we have one special education student that, with regard to the IEP, we are paying for that child to attend Holy Redeemer.
Okay, thank you.
That's just one student.
All right.
It's because of an IEP.
That was my question.
Yes.
Did you have also a question, Bob, about the size of class size in regard to the new building?
Yeah, the person that what they asked was, is there, for each classroom, is there supposed to be, I know, is there supposed to be an X amount of teachers for X amount of students?
We're going to have our class size in the new school, and currently right now would be no more than 24 per teacher, so 24 students per teacher. And I did hear there was a question, Bob, about life skills.
Yes.
There would be life skills in the new building plus any additional needs, special ed needs that we would have, that we could see, coming forward in the future within our district.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Bob, was the question about Coughlin closing November 1st answered?
Kinda. I coach rec softball, or soccer, I'm sorry, and I had the ref at the last game, it was Cosmos, I actually coached for Cosmos, came over and told me that Coughlin was closing on November 1st, because we were just all yapping about the schools and all this, and then I'm pretty vocal about it, I won't lie to you. And he said that he's been told that it's being closed November 1st, and they're not sure where they were putting the juniors and seniors.
The plan, Bob, is to wait till after the Christmas break. That way we can work out any bugs in regard to the movement of these.
For the ninth and 10th graders.
Right.
Because just about the 11th and 12th graders would still stay at the annex.
Okay.
All right, for the remainder of the school year, correct, Brian?
Correct.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr.
Thank you.
Next, we had Attorney Kim Borland signed in to speak about planning.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just want to adjust what I was going to ask in light of the reference to PDE and its report, and ask first, wouldn't it be prudent to await the results of that report, since finances are so closely linked to the decision to consolidate or not consolidate, and take a pause, take a breath, wait for PDE's expert opinion before we proceed any further on this path? That's my question.
Is that it, though? You done?
Well, it depends on what the answer is.
Well, because we don't want to, if you have more, why don't you give us more and then we'll jump in and.
I think that's an important enough question just to let it sit.
To be very honest, Counselor, right now, I mean, this literally broke over the last 2 days. So we wanted to bring them in, working with the IU. That really hasn't been in discussion right now with this board, to be honest. We had done some research that PDE, for instance, Chester Upland, which is going through, it is considered a distressed district in regard to finances. We had heard that, in fact, the service was offered to them. We inquired. We had a conference call with PDE. We initiated that, and very honestly, it's only come to the board's attention over the last 2 days. Should this be up for discussion? Maybe. But I'm just saying, this was a reaction to, because there was some concern with, and I know it was brought possibly from people from your group, Counselor, in the community, about having some consultation on our finances. So that was our thought process. I think we've been open and honest on trying to, and I said this, I have said it from the beginning of the process, we appreciate any help we could get. So to that point, that's what we're seeking at this time.
My 3 minutes up?
No. I took 30 seconds,
But
35.
my question isn't whether or not you've already decided that. We all know the board can act very quickly, and can act within 2 days, and did act within 2 days at the end of June, when confronted with a circumstance that the board felt warranted it. The question is, for everybody, wouldn't it be prudent at this point just to wait a little bit of time, since you said it's going to be a pretty quick consultation, to see what PDE says is affordable and prudent and wise for the district to do? So it's not what has the board done, but doesn't the board agree that we should take a breath?
And actually, Kim, PDE is coming to look at our budget and at what we can do to help pair our budget and do what we need to do that. They're really not coming in to look at this to tell us what kind of building we can build or where we can build the building. They're looking at the budgetary issues of the district. So that's what PDE is coming in to help us with. So in the big picture, we know that continuing on with the 3-school model is projected to take us to where it's going to take us on a deficit within the next several years, so that we're looking at all these options at the same time, and as you heard, we need to put the kids somewhere, just in the short term, and we need a new building, so that to move forward simultaneously with these things apparently seems to be the consensus of the board because of the perfect storm that we're facing right now. I mean, I understand your concern, and I understand the fact that you would like us to halt, but I don't think they have the luxury of halting at this point.
Well, if the train is running into the tunnel and you don't know what's at the other end, and someone's offering to jump on and help run the train, I think you ought to slow it down a little bit and give them a chance to see what's in the tunnel first. And that's all I'm really suggesting, is that I'm not suggesting, and I'm not all about where a school should be built or what kind of school should be built. I'm all about the educational issue in terms of where that should be. The plan for consolidation is, the engine behind that is finance. And now you're looking at finance. So I just think it's prudent, and that's the word I use.
Thank you, Council.
Next is Ruth Borland, who would also like to speak about planning attorney Ruth Borland. Thank you, Ruth.
And I again have to change course from what I was going to talk about based upon the news we had today. And I think I applaud the board of getting help with the Department of Education, but I'm a little concerned that once again we have an emergency that we didn't hear about before. We've spent all the time since June talking about spending $100 million on where are we going to put the schools, what are we going to do. And while you can say building the schools is not related to the fact that you have what appears to be, because you haven't really quantified it for us yet, a severe budget crisis, because I would assume that you do not call the Department of Education in unless you have a significant problem, that you continue to go forward with your plans for building. And I think it is certainly, as Kim would say, it's not prudent, but I also think in all of us who live our lives, if I'm having financial issues and I can't balance my budget, that's not the time I decide to go build the $1 million house. I may decide that I may need a new house, but I'm going to do something that's less than what a large plan would be. And I guess I would implore you to consider options. Consider all the options. I know we have a problem at Coughlin, but I think it's important for you not to say we made this decision before and we're going forward with it. We're on that speeding train. My questions, frankly, were about special education because I'm concerned about that. I think we have a really nice program at Myers. I think we have great teachers. I just wanted some assurance that the special education students were going to be placed in the new facility for high school. And right now that doesn't seem like it's as important because it seems like we have another crisis on our hands. But at some point, I think that has to be looked at very carefully because we have to look at what our special education needs in our life skill programs are. That's it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Attorney Joe Borland. who
Can I
also
just
like-
say something in response to that?
Sure.
Because we have met in talk, as this is kind of all new information. I can't speak for every other board member, but I can't speak for myself in saying that all options for me are on the table. And so as we're looking at different alternatives to try to save money, perhaps in my estimation, it could be an option to look at the scope of the project. I don't know. But I can't speak for the other 8, but I know for me right now, any and all options are on the table, as I believe they should be.
Next, we have Attorney Joe Borland, who would also like to speak about planning.
My first set of questions are both related to the PlanCon process. Has there been any discussions or any submissions to the state on PlanCon C level, the acquisition of new lands?
No.
Nothing. Has there been a date scheduled or a discussion of approximate date that you want to have the PlanCon D public hearing regarding the plans for the new high school?
No, we don't have a tentative date yet.
Going through both the quick no's, I'll jump to another question. What consideration has been given to the racially disparate impact of the new construction for Myers and Coughlin in contrast to the decision to withdraw the plan to make improvements at GER?
First of all, we don't believe there's a racially disparate impact.
There's no belief that the construction of a new facility, when another high school would remain older without improvements, which has the highest minority participation in the district, creates a racially disparate impact?
I think your basic premise is flawed in the sense that Myers and Coughlin are pretty close to each other with regard to the statistics, with regard to racial minorities, number one. And number two, the decision was made to consolidate two schools for economic reasons and reasons having to do with the future, the survival of this district.
Do you believe the building of a new school is an improvement over Myers and Coughlin?
In regard to economics?
No, in general, is it your belief
Well,
that that's an improvement?
I think I'll use the train analogy. What's driving this train right now is the financial situation of this district council. That right now is driving this train.
So I guess in the overall answer is, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you can correct me, that there has been no discussion about whether there is any racially disparate impact because it's a belief that the finances are the driving issue.
Well, very honestly, I've had some talks with Larry Singleton about that issue in regard to it. And I've tried to very honestly show the point that it's economics that are driving this. Okay?
I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dave Wilson who'd like to speak about school closing.
Good evening. I just have two quick questions. I understand that you're going to use the annex for part of the students at Coughlin.
That is correct, Dave, until the end of the current school year.
How did you resolve the heating issue that was discussed at the last meeting?
Very honestly, I wasn't aware of a heating
The
issue.
heating issue only kicks in once the original Coughlin building is taken down.
Right. There is no heating issue right now at Coughlin High School in regard to the annex.
No, that's, well, okay, but I understood the boiler in the original building heated the annex.
That's correct.
That's correct.
So your demolition is not scheduled until after this heating season?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, I misunderstood, sorry. My other question relates to I'm going to paraphrase from the PDE guidelines for school rehabilitation, new construction. Through the plan-con process, school districts are required to submit a project justification that takes into consideration, quote, buildings, structures, site conditions, or site features that are more than 50 years old, end quote. Furthermore, plan-con A's part, project description, states that school districts should take all reasonable efforts to preserve and protect school buildings that are on or eligible for local or national historic registers. If for safety, educational, economic, or other reasons it is not feasible to renovate an existing school building, school districts are encouraged to develop an adaptive reuse plan for the building that incorporates a historic easement or covenant to avoid building's abandonment or demolition. So if your current plan moves forward and Myers is left vacant, what's your plan for Myers and how much is that going to cost?
Well, as of right now, as I understand it, there has been no motion presented by the board with regard to what specifically will happen with Myers. That continues to be debated and discussed, and at some point will be resolved. But with regard to the submissions that were made, I believe they were appropriate under Plan Con A with regard to the present condition of both Myers and Coughlin. But that will clearly be addressed by the board as this process continues to move forward.
Okay, so perhaps if it wasn't addressed in PDE during the initial submission, it will be addressed in the foreseeable future.
It will, yes, it will be addressed by the board as the project moves forward. I mean, clearly that's been discussed. It will continue to be discussed by the design team and the feasibility teams. That is continuing topic.
Much of the conversation prior to the recommendation of the feasibility committee in regard to the recommending of the future of the district, there was a lot of conversation about Myers. And very honestly, we talked at length about how maybe that could possibly be converted into use on multiple levels. Exploring, we did have some cost estimates on how maybe that could be turned into a multi-sport athletic complex to be used by the district and the community. You know, we talked about the demolition of the building, but maybe leaving up the auditorium. Some of the cost estimates, and I know some members of the design team are here, were in the range of from $10 to $15 million. So the consensus of the feasibility committee was to not include that in the motion that passed on June 10th. Because at the and still not at the time, but still at this time, it didn't make a lot of sense to us to include that into the motion when we couldn't account how we were going to pay for it. So it was talked about a lot. And that's something that we would like to, I think, have a conversation about. I don't think that anybody on the board wants to. I know many citizens have described it as leaving it as a Hotel Sterling. That's not a good solution in my or any other board members' minds at all.
Well, with all due respect, Jeffrey, I'm concerned about Myers as a building, but I'm primarily concerned about neighborhood schools. Okay, so what,
I understand.
What you're suggesting, there's some cost to either renovate, repair, fix, maintain, and run. And all of a sudden, I'm wondering what those costs are, and if they're not going to significantly impact the plan that you currently have. Thank you.
Next, we have Councilman George Brown, who'd also like to speak back to school closure.
I'll just stand here if you don't mind. I can't squeeze too many lunches and short. But seriously, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for letting me speak tonight. I have three short questions to ask you. First of all, looking outside, can we please continue to look for an alternate place to have these meetings? There's at least 20 people outside I'm looking at now that don't hear what's going on, can't see what's going on, and out of respect for them, I just ask you to please, for at least the next couple months, just have the meeting someplace where we can get everybody involved, and I'm sure there's people that want to know what's going on that don't know what we're saying. So I'd ask you to do that. Secondly, Dr. President, you had mentioned about indebtedness, and I'd ask you, can you tell us what the Wilkes-Barre School District total indebtedness is right now? Do you have a number that you can pass on that? I'm not aware of it if there is one that's been publicized.
Mr. Brzezwara,
Our business director.
Well, currently our long-term debt is approximately $20 million.
20 million.
Yes, which, and all long-term debt is scheduled to be paid off in full by the year 2022.
The 20 million is long-term debt, that's including interest and everything else? Thirdly, I just want to bring up something regarding a constituent of mine that approached me this past week, living in South Wilkes-Barre, Richmond Ave. And the concern is, as the plan is being developed to increase grades at Kistler, adding the additional 7th and 8th grade, their concern is that's a dead-end street that it bridges Kistler. Will there be busing that will be involved in this addition? Because there's a concern about people not being able to exit, and enter their dead-end street if there's additional busing that may not be taking place there now.
Councilman Brown, with regard to your last question, I can address that because I've sat with the design team with regard to the Kistler project, and actually the project as being developed will be a significant improvement of the busing pattern there. The proposal to date is to include an entire existing portion of the parking lot for buses only, and those buses will come through in a loop, exit back out onto Old River Road, so not come back out onto the one-way street. They will come in, or the dead-end street. They'll come in that street, come through the school, be able to all pull in and then pull out. There will be no backing up of buses anymore. So that's the preliminary plan. It should improve the traffic pattern in the neighborhood greatly.
So there shouldn't be any egress problems there?
No, actually the proposal will add more parking and also, like I said, have this bus loop, which we don't presently have. So it should improve the traffic pattern there greatly.
Thank you.
Next, we have Terry Shields, who'd also like to speak about school building. Shields.
Good evening. Thank you for listening to me, and I applaud the board for their approaching PDE about this situation that we have. And I just have one thing that I'm a little confused about. Myers, apparently, restoration of Myers was not included, or anything to do with Myers was not included in the Plan Con A project. Is that correct? Okay. My only statement is that it's my understanding that the state funds a higher percentage for restoration, and if that is the truth, then I think that it's worth revisiting, and that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Next, we have Frank Zorg, who wants to speak about the sad state of affairs of the Eagles. You can have more than 3 minutes for that, Mr. Zorg.
Oh, gee, thanks.
You got all day for that.
You know, I don't even know what to say to that. First time in history Frank Sorek is speechless. Put that in paper. All right. What I want to talk about is every time I come to these meetings, I hear Dr. Prev referring to the district-wide financial crisis, and believe me, I get it. But what I don't understand is why we're not looking to some solutions that we can look to. I know there's nothing we can do with the collective bargaining agreements as far as pay freezes, but with administrative pay freezes, why aren't we looking to freeze those until we have finished this problem, until we're seeing brighter skies ahead? Because right now, you know, we hear there's a financial crisis, and then I think it was back in September, we're issuing administrative pay raises. And let me tell you, from the taxpayer's standpoint, you know, we're experiencing financial crisis at home as well. And we're not looking to our employers for well, we are, but our employers are saying, look, if you want to make more money, find us a way to be more profitable. I say the same to you guys. You know, if you want to make more money, get this district out of debt. You know, when the district has zero debt and we have brand new, beautiful schools and everything is bought and paid for, you won't hear a word out of me about district-wide pay increases. But while we're in a financial crisis and we're looking to the taxpayers and saying we're going to raise your taxes and give ourselves more money, gee, yeah, we can't swallow that, and we won't swallow that. That's kind of where I'm at. You know, so that's first and foremost. And I don't think it's going to take PDE to tell you that's just some plain old common sense there. You know, it's like managing our family budgets. If we don't make enough money, well, then we're probably not going to Macy's this weekend. You know, I mean, I don't know. But as far as the total borrowing capacity, I know that was brought up, and you said we're nowhere near. We're about $20 million in total district-wide debt, and we can borrow, you know, we're nowhere near our borrowing capacity. Just for common frame of reference, what is our credit line? What could the district, if we said, you know, money's not an object, let's fix all 3 schools and let's do it right. What's the district's credit line, and could we hypothetically get that done?
There is no credit line. What you're talking about, Mr. Sork, is the ability to borrow funds under the Debt Act, and I don't have that at my fingertips as far as what it's based upon what our annual budget is and some other factors that go into it. I could get you that figure, I just don't know it off the top of my head. But we're, as I said, even if we borrowed $100 million along with the 20 we have, we're not anywhere near it.
That's why I was kind of curious, because when we're hearing these statements, you know, that's what we're thinking. I mean, sometimes we're at home, we're faced to say, well, our furnace went out, we need to get a new one, and sometimes we have to look to American Express to get it done, because it's the only way we can get it done. So that's kind of where I was wondering, what is the district's American Express line?
Yeah, and clearly from the district's, you know, the district's financial perspective, since Act 1 was enacted all those years ago, and the Gaming Act came into effect, I mean, the district's ability to raise taxes has been severely limited as opposed to other governmental entities, so that we're forced to play in that ball field.
Right.
And, you know, we have to borrow long term to be able to do those kind of things, because you can't just raise taxes as you see fit to pay for a project. So it's got to fit in your long-term budget.
What about the district-wide pay freezes on administrative staff, non-union members?
I can say this, that in the discussions that I've been privy to, anything and everything is being discussed and on the table as this budget crisis goes
All
forward.
right, I appreciate that, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Stewart. Next, we have Ron Wasnock, who would also like to speak about planning.
Thanks, everybody. Just a couple of things tonight. First of all, in meeting I had with district representatives a few weeks back, there was a discussion where I was told that in the new building, the amount of administrators, principals in the new building was going to be 5, 1 for each grade and an overall principal. When you've been leading people to believe that part of the reason for consolidation is reducing operating costs, and then you're telling me you're going to have schools that are currently around 1,000 students and a new school that has a little over 1,000 students, and you're going to, in this case, double the amount of administrators in that building, I can't really make sense of that in my head. There's also an issue, I think, with children that generally deal with administrators and principals in buildings the most, generally deal with them consistently throughout their experience. And I think that it's going to be challenging to ask students to build a rapport and build a relationship, a meaningful relationship, with a different person every single year from the time that they enter the building in 9th grade to the time that they graduate when they're a senior. The next thing is, I hear a lot of talk and a lot of good intentions about things to do with the old Myers site. Make it a community center, make it an athletic center, make it a performing arts center. But it's nice to say all those things, but then we also have to remember we have a study that says that it's an absorbent cost to do any type of significant and meaningful renovation of this building, and also the fact that we're in a financial crisis. We can't borrow to pay for these amounts and say that both of those things can exist in the current world. I don't know how we can say that, oh, well, we don't want to leave Myers as a Hotel Sterling, and at the same time, we have absolutely no plans and no ability to be able to borrow money and pay for significant renovations at the building. It's nice to say those things, but until I'm led to believe that that's actually a realistic possibility, the words, while they're good intentioned, really aren't anything more than that. And the final question I want to ask is, if there is such debate over where to send half the Coughlin population, once only the annex is being utilized and the Mackin is being utilized, if you have excess capacity at Myers High School right now, why was the consideration made to send those students to Myers High School where they could absorb it? The course offerings, from what I understand in my meeting that I had a few weeks ago, are extremely similar between the two buildings with a significant amount of overlap. I don't understand why that option would not be explored first before looking at acquiring new facilities, such as the Times Leader building, as was discussed at the last meeting. So they're the 3 things I wanted to talk about tonight, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me.
Go ahead, sure, Mr. Gold.
Some of it, I don't know if I can answer all your questions. First of all, the 5 administrators at the new school is not written in stone. This is the first I'm hearing about it, all right? So I don't know that that's good. It maybe will happen, but it's not written in stone. Let me just say that, okay? As far as what's going to happen to Myers, I mean, we all have good intentions, but you know, I know where good intentions end up sometimes. We do have some kind of irons in the fire with partnerships and things like that that we'd like to see happen in order to create enough revenue to do something down there. We certainly don't want to make it a hole in the wall. All right, we don't want that either. I hope I answered some of your things. There are some things going on in the background that may allow us to partnership with some people that may fund some of it. I can't speak for all of it.
Is there any timeline on it? You said that ability to generate more revenue, creative partnerships down the line. How many years down the line? Any kind of idea? Because every year we wait is another year of deterioration.
Well, we're looking at 4 or 5 years, you know, left at Myers. Hopefully will be okay enough to have the kids still there. I mean, we're looking at the process is going to take 4 or 5 years to build a school. So we're hoping that Myers.
So at least 5 years with nothing, assuming we were able to even
before
generate
that
more revenues or borrow more money.
So I mean, we have some time to build, and hopefully partnership with some people, hopefully. But it gives us some time to do some examining and inspecting where our options are. Okay.
Just how many of you were not aware of what I was told, the plan to have 5 administrators in the new building?
I actually met with, if you don't mind me speaking, I actually met with Mr. Borland and Ron, and we were discussing, and Mrs. Borland, thank you, and we were discussing the situation of how we would know that the class sizes would be under 24 per class, and that I was explaining to them how the program of studies would be able to move to a facility, whether it was a bigger facility or not. This is the numbers that we would need. And we discussed the Kistler Elementary situation, and if I don't, correct me if I'm not recalling this right, but we did say there would probably be 1 overall administrator at this point. Hypothetically, nothing has been set in stone as we were talking about projections and numbers. When we use the term administrator in our under an Act 93 agreement, we're not thinking just principal or assistant principal. There's other options as a dean of students or other ways to say that we're going to have help per class. So with the class size that we were talking about combining the two schools, I addressed that with you, saying that we would have one overall principal I could see, and then there would be assistants or administrators is the language I used for the other 4 remaining grades. You would think doubling the population, but none of that has been set in stone. And as we had our conversation, that was strictly talk in projections and numbers as we move forward. I can't speak for the board. I can only tell you my thoughts.
And I have one for you also. You asked what happens when they go from year to year. Well, there's a lot of school districts all over the country that you take, say, the class of 2018, and you work with them for the class of 2020, 2022. You get them in 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, or whatever, or 10th, 11th, and 12th. You rotate with them. Therefore, everybody knows everybody. That's done all over this country.
Yeah,
That's
I
an easy
have
solution.
no idea that was.
That's
Ron,
very
one of
easy.
the things too in regard to, and I'm just gonna dovetail on what Brian said in regard to the idea of those administrators. What we're trying right now too, in cost-saving measures, is bringing back, and it's been part of collective bargaining for quite a few years, is the head teacher concept. So right now, we have schools that have head teachers in there rather than hiring, you know, the idea of administrators in those schools. So that's a concept too that could be explored for the new school in order to fit into.
Right. Well, probably we already have administrators that are existing now that would have to either be honored or unfortunately broken, which would have other consequences.
We could, through attrition, maybe examine that number too as well.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have John Sikowski, who'd like to speak about taxes.
I just want to know if there's going to have to be multiple raises of taxes to eventually build this or to keep this project going. That's all I have.
Well, originally we were told that you know, the state index of 2.5 would satisfy the loan requirements originally. You know, and I'm hoping we can stay with that, but things change. I mean, I can't predict the future what's going to happen. Right now, we're definitely in a budget crisis.
Is it?
Basically, as I mentioned before, Act 1 limits the amount the district can raise in taxes in any given year, so that, and I'm not aware of any, well, I'm sure there was one, but I'm not aware of personally any referendum that was passed to allow districts to exceed that rate.
Yeah, but I'm concerned about like just raising to your max every, like year on year because you just have to.
Yeah, we'll have to do that.
If it comes down to it,
Even if it doesn't.
we're most likely going to have to
Yes, sir.
repeatedly raise taxes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like the index will be our future for the next several years.
Isn't it until what, 2022?
Yes.
You got 7 years, 6 years. Where after 2022,
Even if there was no building project.
We still got to,
Yeah.
just to maintain.
We've got an $8 million deficit.
No, sir?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Next, we have Tracy Hughes, who would like to speak about schools.
Well, my questions kind of have changed in light to what's been brought up to me. I guess my first question, and most importantly, how did we not know this until just a couple days ago? Could somebody please answer
Regarding the operating costs?
our debt and the where we are now. If I remember you saying a couple months ago, we were in a meeting right here in this building that we were in trouble. Now it looks like our trouble's even worse than just a couple months ago. How did we not know this? And I guess I keep looking at our business manager.
Yeah, he can maybe want to.
How did we not know this?
What?
Well, the bottom line is that at one time we had a good fund balance, and over the years we have been dipping into the fund balance in order to balance our budget, only because we were limited to the amount of taxes that we were able to raise. So again, we had no other choice but to go to the fund balance. Over the past 4 or 5 years, our fund balance has been depleted down to where we're.
But how often do you don't examine this?
Yeah, we always do it every year. We know it happens year to year.
I just don't understand. I really don't. I mean, I don't know how you explain this to the taxpayers who budget monthly and deal with a lot less numbers than you guys do. that I would think you would be looking at this much closer. I mean, we just played the solicitor last, 2 years ago, how much money? A ridiculous amount of money? I mean, why aren't we looking at things much closer if things are this bad? I don't understand. But then I do have another thing. It was brought to my attention, a friend of mine whose child attends Kistler, they're being told to bring their jackets to library because the heat's not working.
I don't know that, Tracy, I'll look into it.
There are announcements being made
This is the
for
first I hear of it,
students to
Tracy.
bring their jackets to the library because the heat doesn't work.
I could.
My
You
daughter,
know anything about this?
my
Our
daughter
assistant
goes there, I've not
principal
heard that.
Yeah.
I'll ask her.
I make the announcements every morning, and I definitely haven't said that.
Well, then maybe it's being told in the classrooms. Maybe it's not coming over the
and my office
loudspeakers.
shares the same heating system, and it's.
Well, I'm told that the heating
Well, I'll
is
definitely
not.
look into it, but I mean, I go
Thank
in
you,
and out
Justin.
there all day long, and there hasn't been.
No problem.
No
Assistant
problem.
principal at Kistler Elementary School.
Okay, well, there's.
We'll look into it, Tracy.
Okay, there's
been some cooling problems with the heat, but like from the hot, like with the air conditioning. The
No,
opposite,
there's
but
no
not-
heat, like it's freezing in there. Okay, and then, I guess are there gonna be competitive bids put out on this construction?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I wish there were more competitive bids put up, as you know.
And last we have Len Cornish, who'd like to speak about consolidation.
Yeah, good evening. I think everyone's questions changed. Mine definitely have. One thing I'd like to know, what do you envision as the educational impact that this consolidation will have? And the other question I have is, I think the district had implemented a policy whereby if you were attending a school that was not up to par, I don't want to say failing, but was not meeting state standards, that children were afforded an opportunity to possibly attend another school. Is that a policy that still exists or has existed for children allowed to, if their school was not performing up to standards, that they were allowed to attend another school within our district?
Yeah,
that is a policy.
Len, to answer that second question first, and then I'll ask Brian to talk about, you're talking really about the big school versus the small community school. At one point several years ago, some of our schools who were not up to performing properly or achieving academically where they should be, the state and I believe the feds, in fact, allowed, and there was, this was through our Title I coordinator, federal programs, Michelle Williams, put out letters that in fact would identify students from that school who could in fact have a school choice situation. If that's what you're talking about, school choice. They could choose where they wanted to go because the school was not performing. So, but what has happened since then, and I believe it's the change of the administrations at higher levels, that in fact is no longer in effect. But we were responsible to those students who were given that opportunity, let's say in second grade, and this change occurred maybe in fourth grade, they were allowed to stay at that school, even though the policy of the choice schools were taken away. So it was in effect at one point, and then, and I can't recall if that was a federal mandate or state in regard to the school choice, when schools in fact fell below basic in regard to the assessment tests, and then were identified as schools at risk, and so on. But now, in fact, that's no longer in effect.
What happened also is that some of the schools that they were able to go to fell under the benchmark too. So therefore they couldn't go anymore.
Right, so what I'm trying to say is, I think in the last vaccine that, for instance, GAR still does not meet state standards. With the building of the new school and the fact that you have a new school, that probably would not be considered as not meeting the standards because it's a brand new school. With those children that are attending a school such as GAR that are not currently meeting those standards, would they have the opportunity to choose to go to that new
No,
school?
not under the current guidelines, Mike. And again, I'm not familiar if it's, I'm getting I'm not sure if it was a federal or state mandate which changed.
This would be a state mandate, so you're saying that a
Not
certain
right.
percentage of our children are gonna benefit by a brand new school, state of the art or whatever, yet our other children would not have an opportunity, they would have to stay in an underperforming school. They would not have the
Your
opportunity.
question to me, Glenn, was, do they have choice under the previous policy? And the answer is no, because from not our standpoint, but state or fed, that in fact changed. So you're
This is a
saying
state
because,
mandate.
if you're saying because children are not performing at GAR, will they, under that policy that existed in the past, have a choice to go, let's say, to the new consolidated school? The answer is no, not under that policy.
So they would be required to stay in an underperforming school.
Under that policy,
This is a
yes.
state policy.
This is
not a district
again,
policy.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
It was,
As it is right now.
Pardon me?
That's the way it is right now.
That's the way it is
So,
right
I mean, if Myers, for example, is qualifying kids from GAR, they don't have the option to go to Myers. That used to exist before, it doesn't exist.
It does not exist, but that policy was not created, that's what I'm confused.
No, not by the
created
district.
by the district.
No, we had, actually, Lynn, we had to implement that policy, which dealt with transporting students that we, in the past, had not. I'll give an example, Heights, I believe, was in that situation. We were transporting students from Heights to Solomon Plains. So that
You
was
no longer do that, you're saying?
not.
But there are students that took advantage of that.
Yes.
That are still allowed to stay at Solomon, and you are still transporting those students.
I don't believe anymore.
No, I'm not.
I think, Mr. Cornish, you're saying once the school is built, correct? Okay.
Does that policy apply? No, it does not, because
Well,
it's not
after
effective.
2 or 3 years, when the school is built and it establishes its own legitimacy with PA, with the state, now are they able to go there?
No.
First of all, that was 3 or 4 years ago.
The program
Yes,
no
that's
longer
down.
exists.
It's
It's
down.
not existed, and I'd answer, I thought that was.
That was part of No Child Left Behind.
Yeah,
So
correct.
that was a federal program.
Yes.
Right, but under the new standards
That portion was repealed.
Pardon me?
That portion was repealed by the federal government. Yes.
That was 2013.
One other question kind of relates to what Tracy was saying. I understand you have the assistant principal here at Kistler.
Yes.
I do know that, for instance, Tracy's mom does work at the Kistler Library. For the past at least 3 years, there have been constant complaints of not sufficient heat in the library. I do remember a conversation we had, I think it was last year, that the employees that were in that library had spoken to the administration, and I believe the custodial staff, and were informed that yes, they realized it was a problem and it was being worked on. Every time they inquire, they're told it's being worked on. So I'm finding it kind of hard that now they're saying there's not a problem, it has never been a problem, when I know, at least for the last 2 or 3 years, the people that work in there have been complaining of insufficient heat. I know there's a lot of windows there, so I can see it, being kind of drafty there. But either they are not aware, or I don't know who these people are in that school are speaking to, but there obviously is a problem in there. And I do know of children that have had to wear their coats or bring extra garments when they have the library, period. So we're getting kind of mixed information. So I'd appreciate it if someone could check it out.
Justin, you check that out tomorrow?
Absolutely, I was just gonna
So we can clear it up, because I know there's
Because I was just addressing Tracy's question from now.
Pardon me?
I was just addressing the question from now about they're bringing their coats now, but I haven't seen kids. But definitely that's something we can work with our maintenance person to address.
Check
And there
with
are
the people who work
heaters.
in the library, please.
Yeah, check.
Absolutely, and there are heaters in that are controlled by the librarian at any time that can turn on if they feel that it's
Justin, this is your second year there on?
Maybe I used up my thing, but I think someone else mentioned this, that there are classes being offered in, say, for instance, French is being offered, say, at Myers, no French at GAR. They claim that there's not a need or people have not asked for that. With this new consolidation, will it be a kind of even split? Will some of these classes now be able to be offered? I mean, you know, a child can't offer, you know, request to take French if French is not available. And I think the option was you could take it, but if you did it from Skype, or they could do it by Skype, or they could attend the other school. What is with that? If a child were, say, at GAR and they didn't have French and they wanted to take French, should they be afforded the opportunity?
So right now,
And with that, you're out of time, but we'll let him answer the question.
right now, for the sake of this question, at GAR, French is not offered. And the only reason why it wasn't offered was it's an elective course, so it's not mandated and it's not something that we require a student to take. However, there wasn't enough, I'm not sure how many years, it goes back, I'm looking at Mr. Galella, because I know he was
About
there.
3 years.
About 3 or 4 years, that once there wasn't enough requests for that class, they no longer ran that class. So the GAR students did not have at that time the opportunity to take French. For Coughlin and Myers right now, the Coughlin situation is the enrollment has dropped significantly for French. So they know that some students, for college requirements, they would like to take 2 consecutive years to get into a college. So any student who currently was in French 1, that would be moving to French 2. We offered a cyber option for those students to take French, because we most certainly don't want to, you know, not give them the opportunity to succeed in having a 2 consecutive language career. So with that being said, in the new school, we most certainly plan on having everything available that is there, and we will continue to look at all options to allow GAR, if they didn't have that class, to hop in maybe through a cyber, maybe through a digital platform or environment, if they can't physically be there. Go ahead.
I don't run out of time, but just to follow up on that. You're saying a cyber or digital thing. Would this require a teacher, or this is left up to the student to do this? Is this like a class period set aside for them?
Right,
or
right
is this
now-
on their spare time? How would that work?
Right now, for the Coughlin situation that we are in at this time, they actually have a class period, and we do have a foreign language teacher who is dual certified, who is there with them helping facilitate the program as they go through. But a lot of the work and a lot of the subject material is strictly online. It's through a digital learning environment, but the facilitator is there currently helping them.
So there's a class period?
Yes, there's a class period.
But we also, I
Thank you.
just want to mention this, because, you know, Brian was instrumental this year. At Coughlin, we never had chorus class. We never had enough kids that would sign up for chorus. Never had it. Wasn't offered.
Well, I didn't
Chorus.
Chorus.
Music. And this year's the first year we had enough people that wanted it. And it came down to administration and said we'd like to have a chorus class. There was enough kids and we provided a chorus class. It was the first time in years.
That particular school, you said?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
That's all we have.
Mr. Vice President, can I go back to unfinished business for a second?
Absolutely.
Dr. President, yes, I wanted to go back to unfinished business for a second. At the last meeting, there was a lot of discussion on transportation, remember? And I wanted to see if yourself or a representative could talk to Mr. Wall about the specific situation where if a child is slated to be on a bus from their home, and then that same bus is the bus they would be on coming from the daycare.
Okay.
So the argument was that they couldn't get on the bus because they're not picking it up from their place or their local bus stop. However, they'd be on the same bus regardless. So it doesn't fit every situation, but it does affect some of the kids. And so I was wondering if we could kind of get into the weeds with that, find out who those kids might be, and then give them the opportunity to be on the bus that they essentially would be on anyway. Okay. Does that make sense to you?
Yep.
So I know it's not a fix for everyone's problem, but it might help some parents out.
Okay,
Sure. Thank you.
Report from the intermediate unit, Ms. Katzok.
Thank you. The next meeting of the Luzerne Intermediate Unit will be October 28th at 6:30 at the LIU building on Tioga Avenue in Kingston.
Wilkes-Barre Area Career and Technical Center, Mr. Quinn.
Right, our next meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight on the 19th at the Career Tech Center.
Reports from committees, curriculum, Mr. Gulala.
President, members of Wilkes-Barre School Board Curriculum Administration Committee respectfully submits the following report and recommendations listed in number 1 of your agenda.
Motion by Mr. Gulala.
Second.
Second by Ms. Katzok. Roll call.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Ms. Gaspar?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.